All right, everyone. Here's the last example of a question that you have to know for Math 20-3 of the year. Last example of the year. I hope that you're excited for this. This one is a little bit more math heavy. So we're talking about circle graphs still, and I'm going to show you how to take some data. Like we've got some data in this chart here. Oh, I don't like the color of that pen at all. This Here we go. Let's do this. Yes. Okay. We take some data and we're going to put it into a pie chart, into a circle graph. Okay. And so this is how you do it. If you take raw data values and convert them into basically a percentage and then into a degree, an angle, so you could use a protractor to put it into a pie chart. So let's talk about this example and we'll get there. Jasmine surveyed students at her college to find out how they commute to school. The results are shown in the table below. Create a circle graph of the data. So the means of travel is the top. So like the first section of kids or students, I guess I should say, because they're in college, they're not kids. They use a car, but alone. And 75 students answered that they use a car alone. 20 students said that they carpool. 5 students said they use a motorbike. 75 students say they use a bus. 10 students said they use a bicycle. And 15 said they walk. So if I want to create a pie chart, you can imagine it wouldn't be super easy for me to be accurate to just kind of like draw the lines on here and say, this is the 75 students who wrote the car, and then exactly the same proportion, this is the other 75. Like that's going to be tough to do. So what I'm going to need to do is actually do a little bit of math here and convert some stuff. So first and foremost, let's start with the car alone. And we know 75 students took a car alone. And what we have to do is find that as a percentage out of the total. Okay, and so we need to find the total. So 75 students, we're just doing this. If you add all of these together, 75, 20, 5, 75, 10, and 15, you get a total of 200. Okay, so if you were to add those together, that's what you would get. And 75 out of 200 as a decimal, 75 out of 200 is 0.375, 0.375. So like, as an example, if you got 75 out of 200 on a test, you would get 0.375 as a decimal, which is, if we multiply by 100, 37.5%, right? So you know how to do that. That's something that we've done before. So we found that 37.5% of the students actually drove a car alone to school. But again, taking the pie chart and breaking it up into like 37.5% is not going to necessarily be easy, because how do you draw 37.5% accurately on that chart? Well, that's not an easy thing to do. So what we're going to have to do is take this percentage and use a property of circles that we know. So a property of circles that we know is that if I start at this line here and I go all the way around this line, well, I've gone 360 degrees, right? So if I've gone 360 degrees there, what I could say is if I find 37.5% of 360, and then I start from that line again, if I find that as a degree, well, I could start from this line and then I could draw to about where 37.5% of 360 is. It'll be somewhere in that range, and I'm actually going to do it accurately for you. But what we could do is use a protractor, which is a device used to measure angles, and start from this line and measure the angle from there to there to whatever angle it is. We'll call it theta. Now, how am I going to find that angle there? Well, this angle here, it's a simple calculation. I take my 37.5%, but as a decimal. So to find the angle, I'm going to take 37.5%, divide it by 100 to make it a decimal again. So it's 0.375. and then multiply that number by 360 degrees. When I multiply that number, 0.375 by 360, I get 135. 135, and it will be degrees. That means that 37.5%, 37.5% of 360 is 135 degrees. So I'm going to use a protractor to measure an angle of 135 degrees here and draw the lines, and then whatever that proportion will be, this section will be the people that carpooled alone or drove a car alone. And I just so happen to have it set up here. So here's our protractor that I could use. I've got a circle. I want the section of people that drive the car alone, okay? And I'll use a green highlighter to fill it in. So what you can do is you can take a protractor and you can, starting from the center of the circle, it's a little finicky here, but starting from the center of the circle, I go from 0 and I measure up all the way over to, what did I say, 135 degrees. Boom, that's right there. And so my line would be, from the center to the edge here, and then from the center and up there, 135 degrees. And so you move the protractor, and you know that this section with green highlighter here, that's 135 degrees. That's the amount of people that took the car alone. I hope that makes sense. We're going to do that for every single section here. But I'll do the calculation for you, but what I've actually done is I've gone ahead and just found 135 degrees as a section. So that's for the car alone. The next biggest one, it's not in the order that it goes in the question, but the next biggest one is the bus itself. And so that was also 135 degrees because it was 75 people. So I'll go back actually to the example and show you, but the bus should also be 135 degrees, okay? So you can see I was talking about the bus here on that next one. So for the bus, again, I did the same thing, 75 out of 200. It's exactly the same calculations as this, right? I multiply 37.5 by 360. I'm going to get 135 degrees again. Those two are exactly the same, which is nice. But now let's do the other ones, the other examples. So like the carpool, for instance. Just erase all the ink here. So the carpool, for instance, is going to be 20 out of 200, which is 0.10, which as a percentage, if I multiply by 100, is 10%. And so to find the angle that I need to use in my diagram, in my circle graph, I'm going to take 0.10 and multiply by 360. And that's going to get me 36 degrees. So I'm going to measure the angle for the carpool as 36 degrees in here. For the car, it was 135 degrees. The bus was 135 degrees. This was for the carpool. For the motorbike, it's 5 out of 200. So 5 out of 200 as a percentage is, as a decimal first is 0.025. Be careful, it's not 0.25, it's 0.025. If I multiply that by 100, that means it's 2.5%, which makes sense. It's a small percentage. It's only 5 out of 200. So if I take 0.025 and I multiply by 360, 0.025 times 360, I get 9%. Error, not 9%. Hunt, what are you thinking? 9 degrees. And so again, I will use 9 degrees for my motorbike section. For the bicycle, it's 10 out of 200, okay? 10 out of 200, of course, is 0.05, which is 5%. But if I take 0.05 and times by 360, I hope you see the process that I'm going through now each time with each number. I find the decimal value of it, and then I multiply it by 360. That will be 18 degrees. So I'll use 18 degrees for the bicycle. And then finally for the walk, I'm going to take 15 out of 200. 200. Which is 0.075, which as a percentage is 7.5%. So 7.5% of my people walk, or 15 out of 200, or out of 360, 0.075. If I multiply by 360, then I get 27 degrees. Now, an interesting thing, so I'll go to the chart and show you how that looks when we put it all together. But an interesting thing is if I were to add all of these angles together, all of these things together, if I were to add them all together, what should I get? Think about it for a second. Should they all add to a certain number? Well, they should. They should all add to, if I start here as my point and I go all the way around the circle, I said I go 360 degrees. So these should add to get 360 degrees. If they do, I've done it right. And if they don't, then I've made an error somewhere. So I'm going to go 135 plus 20. Plus 36. Plus 9 plus 135 plus 18 plus 27. Drum roll, please. Ding. They make 360 degrees. So we've done our job right. So let's go to the example that I was showing you. So the first one was the car, people driving the car alone. The second one was the bus. Next, I went in order of like how big they are in the circle because it kind of just visually looks a little bit better that way. Next was the carpool. And again, like I used the protractor here if you want to see exactly how I did it. It's a little finicky on the computer like this. I'm not 100% a big fan of it, but you go to the center of the circle and then you measure up to 36 degrees. If we make it a little bit bigger, it'll actually work. This. And so you measure that angle and you should get, an angle of 36 degrees on the protractor here. And it's real close. It's like 36 and a half. But that's, if you were to do it with an actual protractor, you would see that would work well for you. Okay. So that's 36 degrees. The percentage of people that walk, or the angle anyways, was 27 degrees. For the bicycle, it was 18 degrees. And for the motorcycle, it was 9 degrees. And look at that. If we have all those degrees together, it fills in the circle 100%. And so you see, that's how I would draw my pie chart. And having the legend here is a super, super important thing, because then it helps us identify exactly what we're talking about. So in the, I'm just waiting for the pen to actually show up here, but in the pie chart, by 135 in the green here, you could also put either how many people that was or the percentage of the people it was. It looks like my pen's not going to show up. This is weird. It's like really stuck, but that's essentially it, people. Now remember when you are doing a pie chart, you also want to include a title and you want to have your legend. Okay, so I hope that makes sense for you. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for listening to the last lesson of the year.